Very warm welcome to everyone to this Anglo-Israel Archaeological Society virtual lecture. My name's Sarah Pearce, and it's my honor to be here as chair of the Society. And today we are enormously privileged to welcome Professor Ronnie Reich, who's going to talk to us on the Jewish character of Jerusalem of the early Roman Second Temple period, as attested by the archaeological record. But before I say some words of introduction to our distinguished speaker, I should explain a few technical things, even though many of you will be extremely used to the technology of Zoom and the lecture world online. Your video screen has been turned on today on entering the Zoom meeting. If you would like to turn it off, then you need to click on the video tab, but we do encourage you to let others have the benefit of seeing you in the course of the lecture. It gives a more personal, real atmosphere to the lecture. All microphones have been switched to off to reduce the background noise, and we do ask you please keep your microphone off during the lecture unless you're invited to turn it on. We will allow plenty of time for questions after the lecture with the permission of our speaker. If during the lecture or afterwards, during the question and answer session, if you think of a question you'd like to ask, please do this through the chat function button or raise your hand and we can ask you to pose your question in person. Please note that this session is being recorded and it will soon be available on our website, first of all to the members of the Society and then later to the general public. If you have missed any of our previous lectures, please check out our website where you can access the recordings. And finally, I must remind everybody as the chair of the Society that we are a charity and that we rely on membership fees and generous donations to continue our activities of public lectures, of grants to students who go on digs in Israel and to this year too as AIAS, and lastly, but by no means least, to publish our peer-reviewed journal Strata. As a member of the Anglo-Israel Archaeological Society, you help fund these core activities, and you also will get a copy of Strata. So if you are watching and you're not a member, we really do encourage you to join us. And it's very easy to do so by getting in touch with Sheila Ford, our administrator. And so if I may turn to introduce our very distinguished speaker, Professor Ronnie Reich. Ronnie Reich is the Emeritus Professor of Classical Archaeology at the University of Haifa. He's also chair of the Israel Exploration Society, which is a very long-standing umbrella organization for Israeli archaeological academic institutions and a key player supporting and initiating archaeological research in Israel. Professor Reich studied geography and archaeology at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His master's thesis on Assyrian architecture in the land of Israel was supervised by Yigael Yadin and led to a number of important studies. His PhD represented a major shift in his focus to the early Roman period as a result of his work as assistant to Nachman Avigad, supervising the excavations in the Jewish quarter of the Old City of Jerusalem from 1969 to 1978. And during the course of those excavations, dozens of stepped mortar installations were uncovered. Professor Reich's thesis in 1990 provided a comprehensive study of this groundbreaking work and this phenomenon, which culminated in his major volume on mikvaot, or Jewish ritual baths in the Second Temple, Mishnaic and Talmudic periods, published in 2013. This is universally regarded as groundbreaking work. For the first time, the Jewish ritual bath was recognized as a common element in the material record of early Roman Palestine. From 1995 to 2010, Professor Reich co-directed with Eli Shukron excavations at the city of David. Major discoveries were made, as is well known. Among the most significant, the Siloam Pool from the Second Temple period, a fortification system of Jebusite Jerusalem from the era of King David and the First Temple period, and a Herodian street and drainage canal from the late Second Temple period. The analysis of the finds, together with the history of their discovery and the history of the city of David, is brought together in a major volume, Excavating the City of David, Where Jerusalem's History Began, published in 2011. In 1995, Professor Reich also joined the Department of Archaeology as a faculty member at the University of Haifa and served as its head of department from 2002 to 2005. For his outstanding service to the understanding of the archaeology of Jerusalem, he was awarded the Jerusalem Prize for Archaeology in 2000 and the Austrian Cross of Honor for Science and Art Class 1 in 2012. Among Professor Reich's vast record of publications, a major recent contribution is his day-by-day, everyday life of the Jewish community in the late Second Temple period, published in 2021 in Hebrew. The subject features prominently in his work, from materials on Masada to fish bones and the diet of First Temple period Jerusalemites. His subject today is the Jewish character of Jerusalem of the early Roman Second Temple period, as attested by the archaeological record. And it's our very great privilege to hear from you, Professor Reich. Thank you.
Thank you. Such an introduction. Wow. Part of it I already forgot, my history. Anyway, I invited you to hear about Jerusalem of what we call the late Second Temple period. If you put it in centuries, more or less from the middle of the 2nd century BC, the rise of the Hasmonean dynasty, Hasmonean family to the throne, down to the year 70 Common Era. This is about 200 and so years later, when Jerusalem was besieged and destroyed, and the temple destroyed by the Romans after, bloody revolt. I hope all of you know of it. Anyway, this period of time, this is Great Jerusalem, with in the middle the days of King Herod, the great builder, which we'll talk about it in a moment, not for his building activities, but for one aspect of it. So we have the time frame. We are in Jerusalem. Let's start it, and please, it's in your hands to click, to share the, and to click, please. Next. I'll say next, and you move one. Well, an air photo, this is, I chose a wide one, but you can see at the lower right-hand side of the Temple Mount with the golden dome of the rock, the Islamic dome of the rock in the center. It's a vast rectangle, 280 by 500 meters in size, the largest in its time, which is, as I said, the early Roman period in the large world around us. And this is important. Please go next. We'll see it a little bit from closer. You see the Temple Mount rectangle. We see the Dome of the Rock in the center. There once stood the temple to the God of Israel. And you see today the Dome of the Rock. And you see also the Al-Aqsa Mosque with a grayish, smaller dome. And I would like first to emphasize the role of this edifice, the Temple Mount, not so much the temple itself, please. Next. When one reads, studies, books about King Herod, you will find occasionally, like Aryeh Kasher and Eliezer Witztum's last book on King Herod, that his building activities were an outcome of megalomania. I'm not a psychiatrist. I cannot say anything on this aspect at all. But I think that it, at least in this occasion, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem was enlarged by King Herod to meet a need, to meet something which was very much in demand, and this is space. You see, it was an enlargement from large Temple Mount precinct to an more than doubled in size. And why is it? Please, next. Judaism as everybody knows, is a monotheistic faith. The belief in one single deity, the God of Israel. But there's one more peculiar thing in this faith, that it permitted only a single place of worship. If you go to the Roman world around, or the Hellenistic world, more to the east, or even to the ancient east, our area, you will find in any culture many temples. And if a community, its membership grew within the years, they simply would have built another temple for their growing population. I once counted in Rome alone, the city of Rome alone, I think more than 50 or even more than 60 temples. Not all of them were active at the same time, but many of them were. And this was, of course, an impossibility in Jerusalem, in Judah, in the land of Israel. Only a single place of faith, of worship, of cult. And for this reason, I think King Herod extended his the Temple Mount. Please, next, and we'll see a next picture, please. Yes, this is an artist presentation drawn by Shalom Queller, a very talented artist. We went to him, me and my colleague Yuval Baruch, and said, look, we always see the reconstructions of the Temple Mount at the moment when it was finished and the people were not let in, totally empty, etc. We would like to see once something different during work, half finished or so. And this is what he drew here, the temple in Jerusalem. And you can see the older temple in the center, not the temple, the temple is the white building. You can see the older Temple Mount, which is a square around it, complete, of course, because it was the existing one. And then around on a larger scale, on larger dimensions, actually, you see the foundation trenches and beginning of construction on the right-hand side of the Herodian extension. For this, by the way, he had to demolish large neighborhoods around the older Temple Mount, which we find in our excavations. Simply houses which were cut down, leaving behind only the cellars, basements, mikvaot, cisterns, but all the upper part of the houses is gone for the sake of this extension. And please, let's see the next one. This is the famous model, the Holy Land model, as we call it, today at the premises of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And as I say, before they let the spectators in, just empty, as if the place ever was as empty as this, but you cannot show small, tiny figures on the place. So this was done to meet a need, the ever-growing population in Jerusalem, which on the three main festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, which is Easter, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, were gathered in Jerusalem in an order of magnitude of several tens of thousands, certainly more than several thousands, certainly less than hundreds of thousands, so tens of thousands. And on Pesach, particularly on Pesach, they were accompanied, so to speak, with several thousands of sheep for the Pesach sacrifice. This is a real, what we say in Hebrew, balagan. And the Mishnah speaks of organizing the mass of people and animals on Pesach in 3 shifts, which had to enter the Temple Mount, the animals slaughtered and skinned, and then take them out. The second shift, 3 shifts in one, how should I say, one afternoon and evening before the day begins, the feast begins. So for this, space was needed, and this is peculiar, very different from any other culture. I once went to the Samaritan Pesach on Mount Gerizim. They slaughter still sheep on Pesach just to count how many sheep they were slaughtering. And a community of several hundred people slaughtered 35 sheep in this occasion. So I received more or less the proportion of number of animals to number of people. And in any way, for this space was, and for this, the Temple Mount was enlarged. Next, please. Here you can see on this diagram how it was before Herod, the yellow color, the square, let's call it ancient Temple Mount, and in green, the extensions to the north, south, and west, not to the east, done by Herod. And we have still from this occasion, one inscription, actually two copies of the same inscription in Greek, which was more or less located at the fence between the Temple Mount in yellow and what is called the Hell. We'll come to it in a moment, the inner courts around the temple. So this is an archaeological item. This is housed in Istanbul, and another fragmentary inscription we have in Jerusalem. Although it travels around in the world to various exhibitions, and I've not seen it for a long time. Next, please. This inscription in Greek says what is translated here into English: no foreigner is to enter within the balustrade around the sacred pressing. Whoever is caught will himself be responsible for his consequent death. Thanatos. Next, please. This brings me to what was developed in relation to the temple, by the way. It is what I call the geography of holiness / purity. This also was the case in the ancient world around, that anything connected with the temple was holy and was different from mundane daily life all around in the city, and that there was usually a fence around, and from unholy areas, secular areas, people entered into the holy. But here in the land of Israel, particularly for Jerusalem, for the Temple Mount, this was developed further into what is called 10 holinesses in the Mishnah, Eser Kedushot, saying that an elaborate system of 10 concentric areas, one within the other, one holier from the one outside it, and required various ascending in nature degrees of behavior from the people who enter it from one area to the other. We will count it now. I bring just a summary in a moment, and you will see that there are actually 11 holinesses. We leave it probably to the end. I don't have the time now to explain how 10 were made into 11, but let's leave it to the end, if you remind. Please, next. So here I read Mishnah Kelim. There are 10 degrees of holiness. The land of Israel is holier than any other land, wherein lies its holiness, in that they may bring the Omer, the first fruits, and the 2 loaves. These are the 2 loaves of Shavuot. Don't confuse it with other pieces of bread in the temple, which they may not bring from any other land. I will not go into all the details, but just give the captions of these concentric, and then we'll see it also on a map. Please, next. Now we go to 3. Within the wall of Jerusalem is more holy than the land of Israel. The Temple Mount is more holy than within the wall. Please, next. The rampart, the Hell, I mentioned it already, where the inscription was probably mounted, the Greek inscription. Pay attention, by the way, that only from here into the Hell, Gentiles are prevented of entering. That means that into the Temple Mount, which is 1 degree earlier, Gentiles, non-Jews, could enter. I'll And when we go to the court of the women, and the court of the Israelites, and the court of the priest, and please, next. And between the porch, the ulam, and the altar, and the mizbeach, we are here already inside the temple, the sanctuary, the hechal, and finally the Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKodashim, is still more holy, for none may enter therein save only the high priest on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, at the time of service, Bishat Avodah, the temple service, I mean, not to work. And you see, it's 11 areas, not 10 as the caption of the list goes. So this is a very elaborate system. Please, next, and we'll see how it can be demonstrated on a map. All the bluish around is Jerusalem. Then we enter into the Temple Mount, not the Herodian Temple Mount, which you can see in dark green around, but into the yellow part, the square, which was, despite the enlargement by Herod, it is only the yellow part which was considered holy, binding, related to the halakha, the Jewish religious. And then we go as the arrow. The hell is the green one around, and then we go into the courtyards, the azarot, from right to left, from east to west, until we come to the Holy of Holies. This is the reddish small square down there. So this is this elaborate geography of holiness. And in relation to this, please, next, we come to additional archaeological findings. Let's begin with one that I think I already, next please, have spoken to you several years ago. I think it was on mikvah. A mikveh is a ritual bath, Jewish ritual bath. It happens only, present only in the Jewish culture. Nobody around, with one exception, had such water installations with water which met certain religious regulations. This is what made the water different from any other water container or water contained in a container, although they are the same H2O, right? Chemically, it's the same. The only exception is in the temples of Asclepius, the Greek deity of health. And there you can find several of these installations, but they were used differently. They were not used to take a ritual immersion in it, total immersion of the body, but to take out of it water and sprinkle on those who frequented the temples. And it's different there, but at least I have to mention it that that's the only place we have something close to our mikvah. I say my PhD, although I never in my life went into a mikveh, I must admit. Anyway, the mikveh is the physical remnant, the physical installation which represent a very elaborate religious doctrine of purity / impurity. It's the means by which an observant Jew, and in those days everyone was observant, could bring his body from an impure state to a pure state, simply by entering the water in and out, and that's it. And the mikvaot appear everywhere in strata of this period of time. Only in Jerusalem, I have on my list, when I started my PhD in the 1980s, my study, there were 60 were found in excavations of Nachman Avigan in the Jewish quarter, 60. Well, not all of them were complete. You know, half a mikveh was once a complete mikveh, right? But at least it represents one dot on the map of the mikveh. Today I have on my list, I think 180 only in Jerusalem. And Jonathan Adler, my follower in the mikveh business, in his list several years ago, recorded 800, about 800, all around Eretz Israel. of the Second Temple period and later in the Mishnaic and Talmudic periods, that is the Byzantine period. It is very typical to the Jewish community in those periods of time and does not appear in other cultures at all. Let's see just one or two more pictures of mikvaot. Bakasha, next. Yeah, this is one scene from the inside. I'm sitting there with my afro hairdo. This is the early 1970s, I think so. Please, next. Up, you jumped one. This is the famous one, which is just opposite of the Temple Mount in the park there, as you can see, with the divided staircase separating those who enter, which are in an impure state, and those who exit in a pure state, because impurity, according to the Jewish halakha, is transmitted by touch. And whereas a larger crowd, this can occur, and then people had to simply do the same way again. And now a few more next. Yeah, just picked a few of them. You see, the regulations of building them are very simple. For example, the shape of the installation is not important. Needless to say, the number of steps. There are some mikvahot with 3 steps and others with 25 steps, like those in Qumran. What is important in the mikveh is the water, more than in the tractate mikvahot in the Mishnah deals with the water, less with the mikveh, the container. Okay, let's go on. I have to look at pools of Jerusalem, large pools in which large amounts of water are concentrated. This is the map of Jerusalem of Second Temple period, and you see the blue rectangles all around. This does not occur in other Eastern cities, or Greek cities, or Roman cities, simply not. The only place, a student of mine, David Gurevich, wrote his PhD under my direction, found out on the open pools of Jerusalem in this period of time that only in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, he found a city which constructed large pools. And Mecca is also a pilgrimage city, which in a later period of time had to house once a year, and we are now exactly in the Hajj time. And for this, they also have built water pools for the pilgrims. Yeah, please. Let's next. Yes, this is the pool of Siloam, which I had the opportunity to dig the eastern part. I don't know what happened with the western part. Maybe at the end you will probably ask me what happens there. But this is at least part of the Siloam pool at the southern end of Jerusalem. You see, the city had to provide water for the pilgrims. They did not provide any food. I mean, if somebody was hungry, he had to buy his food. But there was a religious regulation that he could bring food with him. This is called the second tithe, Kodashim Kalim, Maaser Sheni in Hebrew. And he could, this is a tithe not given to the priest families, but to himself. But there was one condition: he had to eat it within the city perimeter, or at least very close to its walls. And this was probably a way to ascertain that people brought with them enough food for the stay in the city and not start to beg around. Water had to be provided by the city, and this was done with the help of the pools. Please, next. One outstanding phenomenon is the use of stone. Not only in Jerusalem, all over the country now we know it, but in Jerusalem it was observed for the first time, probably for the obvious reason written in the Mishnah that clay avanim, vessels made of stone, are not susceptible of ritual impurity. They simply don't absorb impurity. The reason is not stated. I will leave now possible reasons out of it, but this is a phenomenon. Stone was used in large numbers only in this period. In earlier times or in later times, only hard stones to create millstones and grinders and pestles and mortars, etc., were used. But in this particular period of time, soft chalk was used to make various types of vessels. Here's one example. Let's see next another picture. And another, please. And I will just remind you that at least for the big containers, as you can see, this is about a meter high, each one. The scale is missing here. Reminds us of the description of the wedding at Cana in Galilee, as described in the Gospels, the New Testament. And I think it was the first miracle, so to speak, that Jesus from Nazareth did when he turned water into wine. And the writer takes the trouble to mention that the water was held in 6 stone containers, as the habit of the Jews in those days were. So this is the only possible type of stone vessel that could hold water, and this was probably the function. Next, please. We are still with stone, but now we come to stone scale weights. I studied it particularly, also published a book on this several years ago. You can see them on the left-hand side. Till now, in my book, I studied only about 500 of these scale weights, but in the meantime, the excavations have brought up to 800. And I think there are even more. Okay, every other day I get a telephone call, so hey, we found 2 more of these, etc. This is very typical to Jerusalem and to the Jewish culture. Why? Because in the large world around, the Hellenistic world, the early Roman world, nobody uses stone anymore to make out of it scale weights. They use lead. As you can see, I brought here one example of lead scale weight. I think it's from Tzipori in Galilee. But you don't find any scale weights made of stone in Tzipori or in Caesarea or in Dora or in Ashkelon or in Ashdod, in the Hellenistic towns. So Jerusalem still does not go with the fashion and still continues to produce scale weights in large numbers out of stone, whereas in the world it's made of lead. Why is that? Well, first of all, lead is much more convenient for use. If a lead weight, you drop it by mistake to the ground, it at the most gets a little bit deformed, but the mass, or the weight as you would call it, stays the same. Whereas a stone weight, when it falls down, you can lose a chip of stone, and this is then, if you continue to use it, you cheat on the client, because you give him less merchandise for the same type of weight. So why is it that we're still using stone? First of all, this is probably another manifestation of the doctrine of stone purity, as it does not absorb any type of impurity possible. And in a market where you meet people, unknown people, this might happen every day. On the other side, it is also probably because in the Bible, in the Old Testament, a weight is called even, stone. Lo yebekischa even ve'even. You will not have in your pocket a stone and a stone. That means stones of different masses representing the same mass. So to prevent you from cheating the people. So maybe for this, they still used stone. And by the way, please next. It is interesting, but most of those stone scale weights come only from Jerusalem, 96%. There's one in Gamla found, one in Qumran, one in Enfeshcha, 10 in Masada, but Masada we know are people who fled from Jerusalem, probably taking with them 1 or 2 or so weights with them, who knows. So it's a very typical Jerusalem type of object of find. Let's go on. We have still, yes, ma'am. Please, next. Yes, they are found everywhere, the scale weights in private houses, in public areas, in the city dump. By the way, in my study, I weighed them, and I calculated also how much they miss, because usually in private houses, most of them are complete, even intact. Whereas in public areas, there are more stones which miss a splinter here and there. And of course, in the city dump, they are broken, because that's the nature of the city dump, which will come in a moment to it. Bakasha, next. Yeah, we are in the city dump, the Jerusalem city dump, which we could locate. We suggested that this is the place. We'll see it in a moment on the map. And you can see it's a huge mass of nothing. It's only debris and stone splinters and pottery shards and bones of animals in large amounts. Please, the next. Here you can see again the map of Jerusalem, and if you push the button, you will see the location of the, please next, of the city dump on the eastern side, southeastern side of Jerusalem, a large area where the garbage which accumulated in the houses was moved on probably a regular basis, probably by one unit in the city municipality of Jerusalem. And indeed, in the excavations which were mentioned before by Nachman Avigad in the Jewish quarter, we have not found any accumulation of garbage, of broken things, which usually accumulate in archaeological sites. And from time to time, the people in the houses have to raise the floor, simply level out the garbage and tread the floor. And you, this not in these houses. They were very nicely treating their homes and removing the garbage to the area indicated on the map. And this brings me to 2 phenomena which I cannot show you because they are negative findings in the city. How can I show something which was not found because it had not to be there? Just a blank screen? No. So at least the first one, please next, are yeah. This is we from this just before this, from this huge garbage heap dump, we sifted meticulously, wet sifting 2 truckloads, a large sample. And you can see this is just one day of sifting, and you can see the difference between various types of stones. And the second from the right above are pottery and fragments, and the ones on the low one on the right hand upper part are animal bones, and 3-4 tessera stones on the lower right hand corner, etc. 1 coin, you can even see 1 coin on the upper right hand side. There's 1 coin. This is the amount of 1 day's work, and we worked an entire summer occupying the children of Silwan, the Arab children of Silwan. They earned nicely in that summer, and we received a very nicely statistical breakdown of information. Let's continue next. And you can see here from another student of mine, Ram Buchnik, who, in collaboration with my colleague, Professor Bar-Oz, is a zoologist. He studied the animal bones found in the city dump of Jerusalem. This is just one diagram of his. And you can see here what he has found in 2,887 bones. This is on the bottom. You can see that the most that we find are bones of cap ovis. This is capra ovis. These are goats and sheep. You cannot, in fragments, you cannot tell the difference if it's a bone of a goat or of a sheep. But anyway, probably most of them are sheep. This is the Pesach offering, as you can imagine. But this is less important here. What I wanted to point to is the 0 next to it on the right-hand side. 0 bones of pigs, nothing. The rest you can read for yourself. And this indeed is the case, because if we compare it to bones obtained from the later period, late Roman, under the Roman army, and Byzantine Christian Jerusalem, bones of pigs appear in large numbers. So this is a culture-related subject, and this is particular to the Jewish people. By the way, the 0 will appear again in the early Islamic strata, period strata, because they as well did not consume any pork. So 0 pigs. Another 0 is in a different side of the city, and this is no representations of any, artistic representations of any figures, faces of people, persons, or of animals, with one exception. One exception, and because the second commandment in the 10th commandment in the Old Testament speak of thou shalt not make any graven image, etc., etc. So they kept it in this particular period. They kept it strictly. We don't have it at all in Jerusalem. Not even in the city dump any fragments of figurines, for example. Whereas when I compare it to the garbage of Maresha, an Hellenistic period, an Hellenistic city, I know as the crow flies 30, 40 kilometers from Jerusalem, I know of 2 PhD theses that were made on the figurines of Maresha. So many figurines were found there. And in Jerusalem, nothing, except for one exception. Let's see it next. Well, this we spoke of. We can next. Yes, just to remind you that it is also brought in writing in the rabbinic literature. Kol partzufot hayu b'Yerushalayim chutz mishel adam. All images were in Jerusalem, save for those of human beings. With one exception. Let's see it next. And these are coins, silver coins. This is one that we have found, a silver tetradrachm. And this is the type of coin which was brought to the Temple of Jerusalem as the temple tax. This was the preferred coin to be brought to Jerusalem because those Tyrian from Tyros on the Phoenician coast, there they were minted, were known to hold the purest silver of all other coins around, and to the temple you bring the best. So this is an exception because we have here a human head and a bird of prey, and both are real no-nos in the art in Jerusalem. I don't have an explanation, a good explanation why these were permitted. So please don't ask me. Next, please. Yes, we still have time. We still have time. Maybe not for everything that I wanted to say, but at least cooking pots. I like very much cooking pots. Through my hands went these cooking pots, whether complete, whether broken, in huge numbers in the recent 40 years. They are found in 2 concentrations. Complete ones like these were found in cisterns in houses in the upper city. Why should, and these were cooking pots that were used. You can see the lower part of the body of the pot is with soot on it. Certainly were used, not new ones. And please, let's continue. Next. These ones, on the other hand, were found next to the city wall, around, not far away from the city dump that we've seen before, the southeastern part of Jerusalem. And you see, Yigal Shiloh found complete ones, large numbers, many more than what you see here. And we too found near the wall, this is the lower courses of the Iron Age wall, which at that time was still seen. And you can see the cooking pots just next to wall one. The four we see in the upper picture, and you can see cross sections of. We don't have even place to house so many of these, and they are found in large numbers. What are these? Please, the next. First of all, those in the houses, this was suggested by Asher Grosberg, maybe they represent the notar in Hebrew, the rest, residue. Probably food which was brought from the temple to the priest families, which they were entitled by the law to consume because they were priests. The priestly offerings, probably not everything was consumed, but they could not throw it away to the city dump because the rest of the people, the Israelites, were not entitled to, use these cooking pots with what is left there from those priestly offerings. A possibility. A good explanation. I hope it is correct. Those on the city perimeter were simply left behind by the pilgrims. In our sifting project that we've seen before, we counted, there's a way to count how much these fragments represents, how many complete cooking pots they represent. And it turned out that about 30% of the pottery objects dumped into the city dump were cooking pots. And I asked myself, how is it possible? Because Avigad in their private houses found out that about 10% of the household objects were cooking pots. How from 10% it turned into 30%? This is an impossibility unless you take into account the cooking pots used by pilgrims, which are outsiders, have nothing to do with the people living in Jerusalem itself. They bought these cooking pots, probably the cheapest type of pot that could be bought in the market, and cooked their food for a few days, a week, Pesach is a week, etc. And then what should we do with it? They simply left it behind, complete, intact, for us to find. This is again another phenomenon which is peculiar to this city. Next, I hope I still have time. Yeah, here you see the difference: 2 cooking pots, 3 cooking pots, and the jars and the other objects around. Please, next. Yeah, I think this is the last subject, and these are jars which were imported from the Greek islands, from the Greek Isles. What we call in general terms Rhodian jars, although not all of them are from Rhodes. It depends on the shape, etc. What is important, I mean, not the jars were important, the wine inside was important. The wine was the important part. Please, let's see the next photo. Each one of them on the handle is imprinted with what we call a Rhodian seal impression, and it gives in hundreds, no, more than hundreds are already known from Jerusalem. They give 2 things. They give the name of the producer of the wine, as today, by the way, and the year in which the wine was produced, according to the time reckoning of each particular island or city, etc. So you can, when you have large numbers, as you've seen already, you can statistically sort them. And let's see one sorting, then the next, please. I think it's the last one. No, not the last one. And you can see here, number of handles. And on the other side, you can see the period of times in which the particular handles bear the date on them. So from the early Hellenistic period up to the year 205, we have a certain amount. Then in the first half of the 2nd century, between 205 and 175, more or less, when the Hasmoneans came to power in Jerusalem, and we have the largest number, and then suddenly the number was reduced dramatically to almost nil. This, of course, is related not to the jars. The jars are just the container, but to the wine that they hold, which actually was forbidden to the observant Jews in Jerusalem, in Judah, in the land of Israel, because it was wine produced by Gentiles, and it is not forbidden to consume it. So the handles show us how the consumption grew, came to a peak, and then suddenly dropped down to almost nothing. The next, please. We'll skip it. This will take me too much time. Yes, let's go to the last one. The last one, please. Yeah, this one. And this is, no, let's see first from the previous, yeah. And this is the typical outstanding way of Jews in this particular period to bury their dead in what we call, in burial caves, in what we call a secondary burial. First, bury the dead in the locally in the niches in the wall. We'll see in a moment. And then after a year or so, collect the dry bones and put them into a stone container, an ossuary. As you can see, one, I picked a nice one. This is the famous one with the inscription, Yehosef bar Kaifa, Joseph, son of Kaifa. And this is a different story, not for us now to discuss. The next, please. You can see here, this is was my first personal excavation on Mount of Scopus, 1972. Actually, it was handed to Avigad, and Avigad said, Reich, would you like to excavate it instead of me? Yes, yes, of course. And this is a plan of 5 burial caves, one next to the other, one breaching into the other. And you can see that the third one in the center, number 3, is containing ossuaries. These are the small rectangles inside it. That means that the other ones were cut out and used before ossuaries came into practice, came into use in Jerusalem. But then if you one day reach the depository of the Israel Antiquities Authority in Beit Shemesh, please let them take you there to see just the storehouse of the ossuaries. Several hundreds, maybe thousands, are stored there. This is something extraordinary. And finally, I think it's finally, one of them, just to show you the inscription, Kol di anash mithana bechal tada korban Eloha min debegeva. Any person who makes use of this ossuary, let it be known that it is a sacrifice to God, not the bones, the ossuary, from the person inside, simply to avoid anybody else, not to loot the tomb. There was nothing there of precious materials, but to make use of the ossuary for another burial, by the way. Because these ossuaries, I'm those who favor with the opinion that they represent the belief in human resurrection after death one day. And with this, we come to the conclusion. I hope I've demonstrated you several common in Jerusalem, part of them in the entire country, which you will not find in any Hellenistic town, city around Judah, whether those along the Mediterranean coast or those inland, I know, like Philadelphia, which is today Amman, or others. This is particular to the Jewish community out of their outstanding Jewish religious faith and cult, which expresses it. Toda rabah. Thank you.
Thank Thank you. That's absolutely wonderful. And you've stimulated a huge number of questions. I don't know whether we'll get through them all. And do say if you want to stop, Ronnie.
You are the boss.
No. Well,
I have time.
Thank you. So it's marvelous. So the first question is, this goes back to a long time ago. Was the other holy walled city Hebron?
In this time, I don't know. In the Second Temple period, I don't know. I have no idea if Hebron was fortified or I don't know. No, walled cities, any walled cities are on the list of 10 holinesses. Any walled cities, even in not at that particular time, but even in their own history. I mean, Iron Age or so. This is even used today, Arei Choma, whether you keep Purim on this day or that day has to do with it.
A question from Stephen Brody, which I'll paraphrase. Have your findings been accepted by prominent Arabic Muslim archaeologists, and are such archaeologists part of your team?
Well, I will tell you something. I have just published in Arabic. We have the Israel Antiquities Authority has now a journal in Arabic, archaeology, only on archaeology. And I have already published 2 articles there, one on mikvaot and one on the water systems of Jerusalem of the Middle Bronze and Iron Age in Arabic. So until now, nobody approached me, but I'm willing to share anything with them. A little bit to chat in Arabic, I know also. So you're welcome.
Thank you.
Ahlan wa sahlan.
Where was the Rock of the Dome in relation to the temple?
Well, there. You want to know the exact geometric on the millimeters, etc. Is it important? I ask myself if it stood here or 5 centimeters to here or meter 20 to here, etc. It was there in the center somewhere above the rock, which is inside the dome of the rock, or perhaps out of sacrifice were there, and the temple was a little bit more to the west. It was there. In my opinion, it's not so important, the exact geometric place of it.
There's another question about place. Was the Holy of Holies of Herod's temple in exactly the same place on the platform as in the Hasmonean or the Solomonic temple?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, there are many people who know, and even in the last generation or 2, several studies, academic studies, maybe 10, 15 of them were published, each by scholars. Each of these scholars, which I will not give by name, is persuaded to the depths of his soul that his suggestion is the correct one. Yes, but there was only one temple, so at least from 10 suggestions, 9 are wrong, right? By definition, I think so. And maybe all 10 are wrong. And I say it is not so important archaeologically. I study daily life in those days, and I think that the people of those days didn't care if the temple was exactly on the temple where the Solomonic temple stood or not, or so, right? So for study of daily life, and I was speaking now only of daily life in those days, it's enough for me to say it stood there, more or less.
Was the water in the mikveh changed periodically?
Well, it was not, well, changed, not. Maybe the mikveh was cleaned. So no mikveh has any lower outlet hole, which is closed with a stopper or so, none of them. So if somebody thought that the water in his mikveh are stagnant or I don't know, stinking, so he had to bring a bucket and bucket everything out, clean it, and wait for the next rain to enter by itself, by gravity, into the mikveh. Could not fill it with waters from a next system. But since the houses, at least the private houses in Jerusalem, had 2, 3, 4, 5 even mikvaot, so if one was defiled, well, we still have 4 or so. And then you can go also to the pool of Siloam, by the way, that we have seen before, was most probably used also for ritual immersion. People could simply enter. These are the stairs for, you remember the stairs entering into the water, and in and out. Now, no washing with detergent or so was required or was done. So just a ritual bath. So replacing water, as I said.
Thank you. Another question on the mikvaot. Were there no mikvaot in the First Temple period?
No, not at all. I checked for my PhD many years ago. I checked all the Iron Age reports, excavation reports of the entire country, scanning the pages, the maps, the plans, not a single one installation which could be used as it was used in the Second Temple period. And this is an invention of the 2nd century BC, from the days of the Hasmoneans. We don't find any mikvaot, not in the Iron Age, not in the Persian Age, Persian period, not in the early Hellenistic, that is the 4th, 3rd, first half of the 2nd centuries BC. We don't find. So the book of Leviticus doesn't speak of any installation. It just says, chapters 13, 14, 15, so that if somebody was defiled, became impure, what is said there, and he washed his body in water and became pure. But no installation is mentioned. And indeed, when later this is an invention, the people came to the rabbis probably and said, how much water? Where from the water? We don't have any indications in Leviticus, for example. And the rabbis had to start and give indications what to do. Dimensions of the installations, or minimum dimensions, the amount of water, the type of the water. And indeed, the Tractate Mikvaot begins with a listing of 6 grades of water. They are not impure water and pure water. No, there are 6 grades in water. Mikvaot water is number 3. Spring water is number 6, is the top. So this is, again, what the rabbis considered, deliberated on probably a long time, and put down first orally and later, much later, written in the Mishnah.
Another question on the mikvaot. So we're very fortunate to have you, Ronnie, as a world expert on this subject. With only stone remains from the mikvaot, how would you suggest the actual structure looked? For example, would there be an area for changing and a door for privacy?
Certainly, you can see it. You can see on thresholds the holes of the pivots where the doors turned in the complete ones. Not every mikveh survived completely. And you see that mikvaot in the houses have a antechamber where people could dress, undress. Certainly. I don't know what happened on the pool of Siloam, honestly saying, because if somebody undressed, you have to take a ritual bath, if you take it properly, in the nude. And if somebody takes off his clothes, believe me, you have 500 opinions in one instance, right? Of all the people staying around. So how did they do it? In one corner of the pool of Siloam, there are holes in the stone steps. And it is possible, I suggested, I cannot prove it, that there were wooden poles there and probably an area closed with mats, which separated the main part of the pool from the the enclosed area from the main part of the pool, and there people could take a ritual bath in the nude. But not all were, as you know, strict with these regulations. And if you go with your galabia, with your wide robe into the water, maybe also was enough for them. I don't know.
One more question on this subject. Soft limestone absorbs liquid. When did people change to harder stone vessels, and why?
It's the other way around. No, hard stone like basalt was used for, as I said, grindings, mortars, pestles, like this. This is in every period, has nothing to do with the type of stone, the soft chalk that we are talking about. But the soft chalk phenomenon started with hard stones, vessels made of hard stones, and which show traces of iron picks, like of used by masons, and probably the masons started with those stone vessels, later replaced by chalk and by artisans, actually, not masons. They started the masons with picks, probably when the rabbis regulated that stone doesn't get impure. And they said, aha, let's invest a little bit more effort and money and create vessels made of stone, so we will be on the safe side and not worry about all the time, is it pure, is it not pure, is this person pure, yes, no. And they started with vessels made in hard stone. We see it, it's in the lowest strata of the Second Temple period. You see vessels, not many, made of harder limestone, later replaced by chalk. And this later disappears after the destruction of Jerusalem, after the Bar Kokhba revolt. It more or less disappears.
Are the stone weights standard?
Yes, this is a long. I can devote a subject only, a lecture only on this. Of course, when you have a large amount of objects, the means, the mathematical averages become more and more accurate. And I could identify 4 what I call weighing systems, one probably replacing the other along the period of time from the late, the last 100 or 120 years of Jerusalem before the destruction of Rome, one replacing the other, becoming heavier by several percent, each replacing the other, and inside a weighing system, they are doubles of the lighter one. Yes, it's a little bit boring for those who are not particularly interested in this type of object, but they group into weighing system, and within any weighing system into a list, a group, each one heavier, twice as heavier as the lighter one. Can remember now. Yeah. From 20, 30 grams, the heaviest that I had was 12 kilograms. And I didn't have even scales for the 12 kilograms and the 6 kilograms. I didn't have a scale to weigh them. So I went to the post office and I asked at the university, and I said, this is my problem. I didn't want to check I didn't know how to check the accuracy of the scale. So I brought with me also several smaller scale weights, which I have weighted in my laboratory. And then I weighted them also at the post office, simply to check that their scale is accurate, right? Which it was, by the way, so I could also the heavier one weigh there. This is many years ago.
Thank you. So a question about mollusks, moving on to the food and the animal bones. Why are there mollusks? And were the mollusks murex food residue in the pots?
Well, mollusks are everywhere around. What do you mean? We find also bones of mice and rats. They are there, especially in the city dump. Whereas, where should they be if not there, right? But when they die, we find also them, and the sieve brings them to light, and we count them. I mean, not everything which is there people ate. There were also animals of burden. We have donkeys, etc. Well, nobody ate them, right? But they are there. So the same with mollusks and.
While most kitchenware in Herodian Jerusalem was made of soft stone, which absorbs water, the cooking pots for food were made of normal pottery. Can you explain this paradox, please?
It's not a paradox. Can you cook in a stone vessel? And not everything stone replaces. Most of the kitchenware were pottery. Well, you cannot make. Well, you've seen the containers of water that I've shown you. You need 2 persons, 3 persons probably, to move such a container with water. This is very, very heavy. Whereas a jar full of wine or water, a single person can move. Not everything can be replaced by stone. So, for cooking, only pottery is the ideal material to be used. It's also very cheap, and if it breaks, Reich will count the shards later.
And then a question on which I know you've written. What was the population of the city in this period and after the destruction of the temple?
Yeah, I hope I remember the figures that Jerusalem, usually I'm a minimalist on population figures. If I go to the Iron Age or the Bronze Age, etc. I didn't do much research on these periods of time, but I accept my colleague Hillel Geva's figures, and I'm a minimalist on this, except for Jerusalem of the Second Temple period, because the city in this period was a more, how should I say, a city in the modern sense of the word. There were no, the people in the city did not practice agriculture at all. You see it also through their homes. There are no bins for storing anything. There are no sheds for animals, nothing. It's a modern city in this sense. The city was provided by many farmsteads around. Many of them were excavated around by my colleagues. And so here for this city, I take a higher coefficient to calculate its population. I can only, so what you do is actually you try to figure out the coefficient, how many people per dunam or per acre, if you like, which are 10 dunams, in what area was housed. I mean, it was not a public area. The Temple Mount, for example, was a huge area, but who lived there except of the God of Israel, right? And he does not count in my count. I came up, and I'm also a minimalist on the size of the city. I don't accept the line of the third wall to be the line which I don't have here a map. Sukenik and Meyer have excavated in 1920s, 1930s, north of Jerusalem. I think that Jerusalem extended in the Second Temple period up to Damascus Gate, not beyond this. For not a few more hundred meters to the north, because in this interval between Damascus Gate and the Sukenik-Meyer wall, you see, I don't call it the third wall, there are no remains of any human occupation, particularly not from the Second Temple period. Nothing. So nobody lived there in this particular period. So it's not part of the city, and the wall was at Damascus Gate, not beyond this. So I'm a minimalist in the size of the city, but I'm a maximalist on the coefficient of persons per acre who lived in housed areas, in places where houses were built. Several tens of thousands in Jerusalem. I don't know, 20, 30,000, not more.
Thank you. Then there's some questions on ossuaries. Are there other types of curse against people reusing ossuaries? And are the Mount Scopus ossuary caves in the botanical gardens?
Those that I've excavated are in the botanical garden. These are there, right? But the botanical garden, there are many other burial caves there from this particular period of time. Ossuaries were found in the caves, mainly in Jerusalem, but we have also in the periphery of Judah, like, I don't know, Gezer, for example. There are ossuaries there, or Ben Shemen, but a few, not so much as in Jerusalem. And yes, and as I said, if you have one day the opportunity to go to AIAS stores, go. If somebody invites you, go. This is an experience.
And I think we have one last question, which is on the question of sanitation and latrines. How did they deal with them?
Oh, you caught me on guard. Caught me off guard. I know in the Iron Age, because we have found toilet seats. Not me. I haven't found anyone, but from the Iron Age, we have already today 7, 8, or 9 toilet seats found in excavations made of stone. There's no way to make a mistake. It looks like a toilet seat. I don't have anything on 2 subjects, by the way, which I don't have an answer. One is, as you said, toilet seats, or how they did it, or where they did it. How they did it, more or less, I know, but where they did it, I simply don't know. I don't have an archaeological answer to you. Another, by the way, how they kindled fire, right? In the homes, there are no remains, no that I can say here, this was a device to make fire at home. Occasionally, when the fire went out, etc. Many cooking stoves, many tanurs, place to bake bread, are found in the houses, but I cannot tell you how they lit the fire. Sorry. You have to leave some questions for the future, for the young generations to solve. These are 2 questions that I leave behind.
And I see one more question has come up, and you are, of course, the expert on the city of David. There's a question about whether the finds in the city of David date to the time of David or the Second Temple period. I guess the answer is read your book, but
no. What are the finds? I mean, there's so much there. You have to be really, really specific. I personally have not excavated or found anything from the 11th, 10th century BC. So I'm not befriended with David, who became king in Jerusalem. Sorry. Middle Bronze Age 2, which is 17th, 18th century BC, and then from onwards, from the late 9th century and onwards into the Iron Age, this is okay. But you see, my excavations were not on the upper parts of the city of David, the more prominent, affluent, how should I say, for affluent people in those days. I excavated near the spring in the Tyropean Valley, where the pool of Siloam, where the garbage city dam was, all the very simple peripheral areas of the city. So I have many answers on daily life, not on, I have more on cabbages than kings, if you know the expression.
Will your book on daily life be translated into English? I'm sure people would like to know that.
Yes, well, I gave it, this was published by the University of Haifa. I received the prize, the Bahar Prize for this. And they have the right for 3 years. It is now November, it will be 2 years that went away. So they have the right 3 years to do whatever they like. They can do also, I don't know, a Netflix series if they like, whatever they like. Later, I will try to if there's a publisher among you, please contact me. Sorry, but these are the rules.
Yes.
I actually gave to the University of Haifa a manuscript, not a book. The manuscript received the prize, and the prize was a certain amount of money, and then publishing the book. Mm. But they hold the rights.
Well, we look forward to that, I think, in the English-speaking world. Thank you. I can see there are even more questions, but
I'm here. I mean, it is now, what is now 20 past 8.
Quite late for you. Well, the last question, let's make it the absolute last question. Where was the stoning place in Jerusalem?
How can I know?
No.
How can I know? How can one know? Right? How can one know? I don't know. How will you be able to identify and say, this is the place, by finding a heap of stones? I suggest you look once again, Life of Brian, maybe find there a clue with the stoning episode, which I found very funny.
Well, you also will see that there are a lot of expressions of huge thanks to you in different languages, in Hebrew, German, and English. And that just reflects what we feel in the Anglo-Israel Archaeological Society, Ronnie. We were founded in the 1960s to promote the work and bring the work of world-leading archaeologists on the archaeology of Israel to a wider public, and no one could have fulfilled that brief better than you today for us. No, but
you should promote also the younger generation.
And we do that too. Yes,
they should work on their English a little, as I did 40 years ago, 50 years ago. I'm not an English native speaker. My mother tongue is Hebrew and German. Whereas Manfred is still here, and English came later. But when I hear today some of the younger colleagues,
well, we were very fortunate actually in March to have a number of young scholars from archaeology scholars from Israel working in Israeli universities come and take part in a workshop with British-based people, all sponsored by King's College London and our society. So we're looking forward to doing more of that in the future.
They have also to study a little bit the foreign languages, like the Greek and Latin that I've seen behind Mr. George Van Kooten.
Hello, George.
Right? Only by the color, you see. And I wonder if somebody from the youngest generation will identify it only by the color.
Yeah. Very good point. But on behalf of our society, seriously, it's an enormous privilege for us to hear from you. And thank you so much for making it all so accessible to us.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Till the next time.
Till the next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.